Okay, so we just past 7 o'clock now, and I think most of our people are in. I don't know, I think regular will let them in as they come, but let's get right away and get on with it. Welcome everyone. Regular, if you want to just take that off for us. Welcome everyone. Welcome to webinar number 3. It's was sure an interesting week. Some good news for the riders that we could start riding. Still a lot of people in the dark, especially for coaches. Are we allowed to coach legally? Are we not allowed? Are you supposed to make other plans? So some clever interpretations around what could be done and couldn't be done. Yeah, so we're going to have some nice chat tonight. Also a very interesting guest with Natalie Hobday. But let's start first things first about what happened during this week. Regular on the other side of the screen, or actually the other side of the country, is helping us put this whole thing together. So Regular, if you just want to share your screen and put the slide up for us on the SAF news about being able to ride and getting to the stable yards. So yeah, for a couple of people, I don't know, I left a voice note to some of my athletes, and this voice note kind of went semi-viral. And where we used I interpreted it in a way that if we use the agricultural side instead of the sport, that we could go and get exercise to these horses that have been standing for so long. And then again, if you use some interpretations from size side, that you've got an exerciser and you've got a stable yard owner, who's then the employee and the employer. That way you could get, with a travel permit, you can get into your agricultural setting, which might be the yard or so on. SAF then came back with something similar, but first they just opened up to between 6 and 9 in the mornings. Now I've seen SAI come up again saying, no, it could be the whole day. Then later in the day, we got another one to saying that now outrides only between 6 and 9 within 5 kilometers of your own yard, but you can come and ride during the whole day, but keep your safe distance and actually social distance. Safe distance, we know from horse riding, it's keep one horse distance, don't get kicked in the face, that kind of thing. So this is a little bit more, like let's not mingle, keep your mask on, hand sanitizers, fill in the forms. So just like the same as with every essential business that's open now. Now, SAI has come with another angle, and it's one that I also can interpret a little bit, saying that if we have got these essential exercisers now lunging and exercising horses from a welfare point of view, then it might be necessary for the employer, who is the stud farm or the stable yard, to also employ an essential services exercise supervisor. So sports people would probably use a coach, but then if you come from the agriculture side, there's no sport going on. So yeah, I don't know if that is going to be an interpretation that we can use. I'm sure there's some clever people that can help us out. So if you've got anything to say, please use the chat function, write something there. If you want to ask a question to any of us or to our guest later, please just start with the word question, that we can filter it and get through the questions earlier. So yes, we can go to the horses, we can go and ride. You can't just go for a cuddle, you can't go for a glass of champagne with friends, but from riding and exercising, you could probably, we still don't have clear answer on whether we can coach or not. SAF says, no, we can't. And us coaches here, I think we have to come up with some sort of idea. So it'd be great if we could all talk together. Okay, so let's move on to our guest tonight. So we've asked South African international competitor, Natalie Hobday. I'm sure from the dressage and show jumping fraternity, we all know her. The guys that's joining us from the other equestrian disciplines, she might not be as famous to you, but Natalie was really one of the people who went overseas and tried to fly the banner and the flag for us over in Europe, and so she's semi-back now. But yeah, she competed in some World Equestrian Games for South Africa in dressage. She's also an equestrian coach, and she's been doing this remote coaching, going overseas and carrying on with videoing on this side, and traveling back and forth for clinics. So she's got quite a lot of experience in this remote feeling that we're all experiencing now. She's also got a master's degree in sport and exercise psychology. And I've got to say in brackets there, cum laude, like I know what it means. But yeah, since 2015 also she's been for FEI a coach developer for the Group 9 countries, going around and really just spreading this gospel of let's coach better, let's all get together, let's share knowledge and so on. So Natalie today is going to just touch on a couple of building blocks for us that us coaches can use now in lockdown and even going out of lockdown. She gives a little framework to work within in how do we really support our athletes? What is the mental thinking, the mental preparation and the fitness, and also that of the horse in there. So yeah, I'm not going to say too much anymore. Regular, if you could switch Natalie on for us, and then we can see. So for those of you not so au fait with Zoom yet, if you're on this computer screen, you go to the top there, you can set your view that you just get the speaker and maybe the shared screen or whatever, so you can play around with that a little bit. Just don't play around so much that you leave the meeting. So but yeah, see if you can get a nice view of Natalie and her shared screen. Natalie, are you there?
Yes, I am. Jaco, can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly. Welcome, Natalie.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us on this webinar.
Thank
you for sharing your vast knowledge with us. Natalie was also one of my role models when I grew up, and I had a lot of lessons with her, and she was my ticket really into Europe as well, where I went to work for her. Didn't work too well, probably too lazy for her, but anyway. Yeah, so yeah, I'm glad to see you on the other side of the screen. And yeah, can you tell us a little bit about more
what happened to you.
Coaching story? Thank you.
Jaco, I'm just looking at the share screen here because host disabled, attendees sharing. So you need to just enable that for me.
Oh goodness. Let's see if I can get us there. Sorry guys, a bit of a technical glitch. It's like a stirrup broke, or someone got a spare girth here. For those of you who still have wine left, I'm sure, top up your glass. The others, go get some water.
Have you got it right there, Jaco, or?
It still says host disabled, so let's see. Regular, are you coming right there?
Are you the host, Jaco, or is regular?
Regular is hosting, so she's working at it. Just a sec.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Natalie, I think you need to share it from your side because I can't share yours.
It just says host disabled attendee screen sharing. So.
Oh, that's a nice one.
Yeah. So you have to enable it.
There's a button in your settings, security. It'll be under security.
Okay. Everyone, that's how we all are learning. I mean, this is now good to learn live.
Regular.
Try.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Exactly. I tried to do something. Are you okay now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I think it's going to
Sorry for that, guys. There you go.
Which one? Give us a second here. We need the PowerPoint up. Okay. Have you got it up, the first slide?
Yes, it's all perfect. Thank you, Nat. You can go ahead.
Okay. So obviously Jaco's given a background to the discussion this evening, and I thought what might be the most useful thing for everybody, because at the end of the day we're all in the same situation, even though it's a very dynamic situation. I mean, we've just heard news from Jaco now that it's changing, but we still don't actually know where we stand as coaches and how we can, in principle, try to not only add value to our pupils, but also hopefully earn some money. So I gave it some thought, and I saw 3 various situations where we are at the moment. As I say, obviously this is changing day by day. But in principle, you have horses that are sitting at a yard where the professional is the owner of the yard and probably able to keep the horses going, and the client is unable to get there, which obviously involves no coaching from our point of view. Then you could have the horse out of work and the client unable to ride for the reasons that the yard, perhaps it doesn't support the exercising of the horse. Again, it still leaves us in the situation of not being able to coach. And then there's scenarios where you have the horse and the client in work because the horses are stabled at home, but again, still no coaching. So the fundamental problem at the moment is that we are mostly unable to coach. What I'm hoping will also come out of that, or this presentation, is that all of you realize that there are actually ways of enhancing our coaching without actually physically having to be in the arena. So that's what I'm hoping we'll find out here. So what are the potential solutions? The first thing that I think is critical is to stay in touch with our pupils. And then bear in mind everything that follows on from here. Although my discipline is dressage, most of it applies to not only all forms of equestrian sport, but actually to all sport. So if we look at the horse training side, as I've just said, you could be in a fortunate situation as a pupil of having your coach or your professional actually riding the horse and possibly developing it in your absence. Or you're at home able to continue riding but without support. And then thirdly, for those of you who, or those of our clients that are not able to get the horses, perhaps actually getting the horses lunged or something leading up to the restrictions being lifted so that at least their fitness can start getting up to a level that when we can all get going again, they're sort of in reasonable form. As far as the riders go, I mean, all we can do from a physical point of view is obviously encourage them to perhaps do Pilates or yoga or any form of fitness training within the time that we've been sort of allowed to move on a daily basis. So again, it goes back to the question of where can we fit in, or where do we fit in, where we can add value, assuming that, you know, most of it is going to have to be done remotely. So what I want to look on from here are, first of all, sort of as a way of introducing, or as an introduction, is what underpins good and rounded coaching and what factors affect performance, because from there we can actually draw on aspects of coaching that we can very, very easily address remotely. So if we look at equestrian athletes, it's very, very multidimensional and very complex. Performance is affected by an interplay of various factors, those being psychological, physical, technical, tactical, and environmental and contextual factors. So if we look at psychological, I mean, that's easily an aspect that can get addressed remotely. It includes not only mental preparedness for training and for competition, but we can also look at various techniques that can improve the psychological aspect of riding. Of course, this also includes people's own dispositions. I mean, that's why it's actually quite important to have good relationships with your clients so that you can understand how they work, so that you can try to assist them to improve themselves in terms of their performance from a psychological point of view. The physical side obviously refers to your pupils being fit, doing whatever sport, not only the riding, but that fits alongside of riding that can support it, and be obviously in a physical condition that is appropriate for success within their sport. So that, you know, obviously eating healthy and trying to be in a good shape and being fit. And then technical refers to, you know, general knowledge and competence. And this is again a side of coaching that can very, very easily be dealt with remotely. And it's often, even though in our lessons we try to explain, we try to make sure that they do increase their knowledge, but very often there's a broad range of aspects in terms of knowledge which we don't get the time to address when we're in lessons, because obviously the lesson side predominantly ends up dealing with the physicality of the sport. So a lot can be addressed in terms of the technical side when it comes to knowledge, which obviously will improve competence, because obviously a better understanding of what you try to do gives a higher chance of being able to translate it into a physical experience. Then there's the tactical aspect, which is another aspect that we're going to address this evening. Again, although often in lessons one brushes on it in terms of, preparing for competitions and that sort of thing, there's quite a lot that one can address in terms of the tactical side of things. And again, it's something that can be done remotely. So having good training plans and competition plans and schedules and everything that goes around actually preparing for competition. Then the environmental and contextual factors, which refers to, amongst others, the social position of a person, organizational position, financial position, significant others, and circumstances. Those, one tends to hear about in lessons, but it obviously has a huge influence on performance at the end of the day. So all of these factors, in conjunction with one another, tend to hinder or promote the capabilities to achieve an ideal mind and body state, which is necessary for your pupil to be able to attain his best. And I think what's important is to realize that some of these can actually very easily be addressed remotely. So if we look at equestrian sport is quite unique in that it's a sport where it's not only about the athlete, it's a human-equine interaction, which amongst other things can also be quite unpredictable. So if you consider that a rider's behavior, their thoughts and their emotions, not only before but also during competition, get transmitted through their bodies to the horse, obviously it stands to reason that it would have a huge influence not only on their own performance, but also on the performance of their horse. So if you take that into consideration, that the language with the horse is a body language, and that thought processes often influence your body language, it stands to reason that it's a huge contributor towards your horse's performance. Then, bearing in mind that all of the disciplines, obviously I'm involved in dressage, which is sort of like an extreme precision, but all of the equestrian sports require precision, elegance, a tremendous amount of obedience. Often it involves the execution of predetermined, very complicated movements. And in order to perform that to a high degree, it requires a huge amount of concentration and a high degree of mental preparation, as well as an ability to manage tension as well as anxiety throughout the competition. So if we take all of these factors into consideration in terms of the ability to achieve a high standard, especially in competition, it stands to reason, if you think about it, there is actually quite a lot that we as coaches can support our pupils with without actually physically having to be in the arena. I'd just like to add here that if there are any questions, please butt in as I'm going along. I know we'll do a Q&A at the end, but if there's anything that you don't understand, or if I'm going too quickly or anything along those lines, please say so. So that's a little bit of a background in terms of not only our sport, whichever discipline it is, but all sports. If we then just move on to our role as coaches, if you take into consideration the word mastery, mastery is a basic human motivation whereby humans or people or athletes tend to seek to be more capable and more competent and efficient and confident in whichever field they choose. And we as coaches can assist this journey by analyzing performance, identifying the steps and the means for an athlete to achieve these meaningful goals. And if we take it again one step further and look at what components actually apply to being an effective coach, it's again quite a broad range. It's not only about being, you know, in the arena and teaching the technical side of riding. It's the tactical component, which I've already brushed onto. It's personal qualities, which has a huge impact on being an effective coach. It's the mental side, which is ultra important when it comes to being able to raise your game in competition circumstances, not only at home in training, but more so actually in competition circumstances. It's the physical side, you know, being able to support, as I've said, outside of the riding, and also obviously the technical side of riding. And then, you know, lifestyle as well plays a big role of that. So performance is, of course, the final product, whether it is competitive or otherwise. And effective coaches need to be skilled in all of these components. So if you think of it, really, if any of these components are insufficiently addressed, it's obviously going to have some sort of effect on the performance outcome. It's not likely to have a positive effect, but it's more likely to have a negative effect. So the following slides are more or less what I think are remote solutions, or ideas at least, to address the technical, tactical, and mental components. And then any of these can be, so obviously I've just tried to consolidate quite a lot, but they can be divided up into a series of either one-on-one sessions with your pupils or small groups. So my idea has been, when it's a more broad subject, especially when it's addressing the sort of mental side of sport, to do more small sessions, but limited to whatever 3 or 4 or 5 people, so that you can actually also address things a little bit more on a one-on-one. Are there any questions up until now that I should know about, or shall I just soldier on? I'm just going to pause for a minute in case there are, otherwise I'm going to move on.
I've got nothing at the moment yet, so people, please, if
Okay.
there's something you don't understand, even if you don't know what a certain term means, please
yes.
ask.
Please, yeah, please do. So I'm going to start off with the technical side and more or less give you an idea of what I've been doing. I wouldn't say intensively, but because I have pupils in a way spread all around the world. I mean, my main client base is Germany, England, and then Johannesburg. And sort of circumstances in the past has warranted, you know, having a little bit creative ideas when it's been, you know, dealing, if people have had problems, to be able to deal with them if I'm not around. So I have done this previously. It's just that now, obviously, under these circumstances, I've sort of brushed up on it, and at the moment I'm finding it actually works extremely well. So this side of it is really dealing with pupils of mine that have got the privilege of having their horses at home. So they've been able to continue riding through all of this. And I've basically worked on a video feedback situation, which has been, for me, actually a fascinating opportunity, first of all, to find out how my pupils work when I'm not there. So obviously when you're in an arena, you know, they have their warm-up routine, and then you have whatever, a show coming up, or some kind of idea, some kind of plan in terms of what you want to bring that person to, because you know them from previous. So in your mind, you've got your own sort of plan how things go. So it's been a very interesting exercise from that point of view, to actually find out what my pupils have learned. I mean, do they have a plan in terms of proper warm-up? What sequence do they move throughout the session? How do they do the cool-off? And then obviously from there, our feedback has helped them to, or, you know, you give homework and obviously help them to move on from there. What I've done is had them more or less deliver sort of up to 2-minute clips via WhatsApp. It has, with some people, taken a bit of time to get them to get the actual videoing of a good enough standard. So they've got to be good at zooming. They've got to do it in a landscape view, and, you know, they can do a full session. I mean, obviously one doesn't need to see the walk breaks particularly, But the start-stop capability of the phones nowadays, the smartphones, means that you literally only, lose a stride or two at the very most. And by the time I get all of them and download them, I've got, I've got Apple, so I don't know how it is with the Android computers, but they'll have some kind of similar capability. I basically download them into iMovies. You can then strip the sound off, and they come up in a whole series of clips, and you can then start a voiceover, which more or less stitches the entire clip together. So if it's 20 minutes or 25 or 30 or whatever, how many minutes they end up riding the horse, you can do a voiceover from the beginning to the end, basically commenting on what you're seeing. And you then, upload it onto YouTube and send the link back to your pupils. So what I've also done further to that is, if it has warranted it, then I obviously give a comment on what I found particularly good, or what they could do better, or what they need to practice, and what I expect in the next session. So in other words, homework. But what has also been extremely beneficial has been to set up telephone calls, whereby we're both sitting on the computer. You have the actual now full video clip set up. Hit play at the first time. They can then put it on mute so that you don't hear the voiceover. And you can actually then go through the session, more or less talking about certain things. So you can pause at whatever moment you want to have a further discussion. And I must be honest, it has been really fantastic. I've had very, very good feedback. And I myself have come to the conclusion that it is not only a fantastic sort of plan B, but has its own value over and above a real-time situation of being in the arena, because of the fact that you can pause and rewind. And if you do it, timeously, so I try to always get it back on the same day so that they've seen it before the following lesson. I've seen really very impressive progress with all of my pupils that have sent them in. So obviously
we've just got a question here.
Yes.
How did you as a coach grow by doing this? Did it change you in the way that you how did you grow from this? Or didn't it affect you at all?
Well, I think that when you're teaching, so when you're in the arena, there is less time for conversation and feedback. What I've found extremely useful, and I'll show you in a minute or two, I have found there's certain elements of this actual way of being forced at the end of the day, but I'm looking at this and thinking, I want to use this anyway going forward from here. Because my circumstances run on clinics, so I'm not there every week or twice a week or whatever. It's sort of every month. I'm in Europe every month, and more or less in Joburg every month as well. So there are times in between where you don't have one-on-one with the pupils. Plus, not every pupil is able to manage every single clinic. So I definitely plan on using this moving forward. Because I've come to the conclusion that there is a whole element of teaching this way that is not better, but has added value over and above in a one-on-one situation in the arena. So I find it beneficial, absolutely. Obviously, if I can do my job better, it's better for me. So I find it extremely, extremely helpful. Has that answered the question?
Yes, thank you. And
Okay.
then someone else also, while we're at it, do you find that people are still willing to pay for your time doing these feedbacks?
So what I've done is I had offered it at first. I mean, now it looks like it might. So I am more or less waiting to see what's going to happen. I certainly started it to get the ball rolling and get people's feedback on it. And of course, the videoing has to be good enough. I mean, I've had some videos that have been sent where no zooming has been done, and at the end of the day, I can see it's a brown horse, and I can't see more than that. So the videoing has to be good enough, otherwise there's no point at all. And then obviously, even though, quite honestly, I think the value is not that different from being in the arena, sort of mentally it will never be quite the same. So, you know, you just do it at a reduced rate. Does that answer the question?
Yes, I think it answers quite well.
Okay.
And, yeah, if you can carry on, then we'll come back to some of it. I'm trying to just paste the questions where it has context, and then we'll carry on.
Okay. So just to run through, I think probably I've said everything, but first of all, what is so important is that it's a test for us to see what our pupils have learnt. So if they send you a video and you look at them and you go, Lord, you know, I've said X and Y over and over again, you have to do walk breaks, etc., and they're not doing it, then you need to, in a way, question yourself. So it is a good opportunity to also test what kind of knowledge you have managed to impart to your pupils, number one. So we've spoken about the video feedback. Another aspect that is, I think, super important is that it lets the pupils demonstrate if they have got a plan. So if they have given thought to their riding, and if they are giving thought while they are riding. So obviously, you know, one can climb onto one's horse every day and have this wonderful idea of all the wonderful things you're going to practice, and maybe it's not the right day for that. I mean, as we know, the horses are, you know, every day is different, and, you know, good riders and good coaches are all about being able to read the situation and then do in that session what actually makes sense for that particular day. So that's another side that you'll be finding out again, how well have you got this pupil of yours thinking about what is actually good for the horse, not necessarily good for them. So they're demonstrating the ability to think for themselves, which is should be one of our main goals as coaches. It gives you the chance to explain and discuss various things. As I said, particularly if you do the telephone calling where you look at it at the same time, you know, it really is hugely beneficial. Rewind, look again, and talk about various things they should do. Of course, you've got the homework thing. And I think a marvelous opportunity to really take the feedback loop and this whole two-way communicating to a whole different level. So I see a tremendous value. Then I just want to show you 2 examples of things that I've also done. So these 2 images I took out of it. It happened to be a test round that one pupil sent to me for comment. And what I did was, you know, freeze frame in the video when I was trying to discuss the frame, the uphill tendency, the correct position in front, and then, you know, you can use the various tools on your editing capabilities, which I'm sure every single computer has, to do the kind of thing that I've done in here, sort of draw the lines and then make a comment. I mean, this particular pupil found that extremely beneficial. And then just in the next clip, for example, it was the same pupil that, you know, she does tend to not particularly understand extended walk and what the frame should look like. So again, it was a perfect opportunity because the frame on the left was more or less the entire, you know, what the frame looked like for the entire extended walk. And I then searched for images on the internet of what the frame should look like, along with clips, by the way. I mean, you know, the internet is full of all sorts of clips. It's so easy. The quality doesn't have to be fantastic. I mean, you can get a clip up on the screen and literally film it off your phone. And I've done a lot of that kind of thing, which people, so in other words, you give them examples which they can compare themselves to, showing it done correctly or better than what they do it, so that you give them a proper understanding of what things are supposed to look like. Because obviously, you know, she felt that she was doing an extended walk, and I think it's abundantly clear from here that you know, she would never have managed to get a good mark with a frame like that. So there's quite a unlimited capability in terms of furthering people's knowledge from the technical riding through this video content. So if you are dealing with pupils that don't have the fortune of having their horses at home, there's still an endless amount of topics that you can address from a technical point of view without them actually physically having to ride. So again, you could do this one-on-one. I mean, my thought was to make it more attractive to pupils, and at the end of the day, give you the same benefit, would be to look at putting together small groups. Obviously it depends on how many pupils you've got, but to possibly do a Zoom meeting limited to 2 or 3 people or 5 or whatever you want, and then obviously bring the rate right down. But at the end of the day, you're still getting the right amount of money, and then your pupils are feeling like they're getting a good deal. What I think is an important point to sell, if you like, to your pupils is that without the correct technical knowledge, in other words, really understanding in their minds what it is that they're supposed to be doing and what the technical aspects of whichever sport it is. I mean, here I happen to have geared the slide a bit more towards dressage because obviously that's a discipline that I'm involved in, but I don't doubt that all of the disciplines have their own things, even if it's dealing with rules, for example. I mean, one can, how many of the pupils know what the rules are? I mean, that's an aspect that very often gets really, left out, or anything to do with welfare of the horse or things like that. So there's really an endless amount of things that you can do in terms of the technical side. I mean, I've included a few examples here, like, for example, the scales of training. I mean, an effective seat. So, what is the correct way of sitting, and what sort of influence does it have on the horse, bearing in mind that it's only through the seat that you can communicate, and that the way you sit and the way you use your seat has an extremely positive or an extremely negative effect on the horse. I mean, very often the way you ride a horse completely limits it to what it's able to perform. And then often riders get frustrated with their horses. Meanwhile, the horses actually can't do it any differently because of the way they're sitting or riding. I mean, I find it, quite fascinating. If you ask a pupil to explain what a half halt is, and again, all of the disciplines, I mean, obviously I'm not proficient in any of the other disciplines, but I've no doubt every discipline understands what the word, or have heard of the word half halt. I mean, get somebody to describe what a half halt is. They often look at you with 500 teeth in their mouth and don't know where to stay, and yet that's supposed to be how they're communicating with the horse. So you can spend a fair amount of time just talking about that and the nuances of the half halt that produces all of the different movements and collection and all of that kind of thing. So if they don't understand how or what a half halt is and what the purpose is, I mean, how on earth are they supposed to communicate with their horses? And then also the paces, for example. I mean, you could talk about, obviously everybody knows what walk, trot and canter is, but what the variations in the paces are, what the frame should look like accordingly, what happens to the weight distribution, how the change of the placement of the hind legs influences the position of the horse in front, etc., etc. So quite a bit of time can be spent on that. And then, for example, of course, flexing and bending. People often don't understand the difference between those two things, and how without those you can't develop any of the two-track movements. And then you can go through all the technical criteria of all of the movements in the current level that they're in, and preferably level ahead, because theoretically they should be aiming for that, so that they can understand, what the movement should look like, what the purpose of the movement is, what typical problems are, and what typical solutions are. If they should ride movements in the whole or in part, or there's so many different variations of the movements depending on what the horse is doing. And you could spend just one session talking about that. And I don't doubt that your pupils will go away from it having learnt a lot, not just, in future, not just getting on and blindly riding, but actually becoming much more conscious about what they're doing and what it is that they're asking their horse to do. I'm just going to, I think I'm still on camera. I mean this, and I'm not sure if it's going into the camera, but certainly for dressage, the FEI dressage handbook, that, although it's a guideline for judging, it's a fantastic handbook, especially if any of the coaches on this webinar are, possibly still evolving as coaches and aren't extremely experienced. They've got fantastic descriptions of all of the movements and exactly what they should look like, how they are marked. And, I think having knowledge of that is only going to benefit yourselves as judges, never mind your pupils. Of course, if your pupils improve from your coaching, that's at the end of the day what we are looking for. So if we move on to the tactical side, and again here I'm talking about things that can be addressed remotely, and it should be I think all people, whether they've got horses at home and able to ride or not, should be encouraged to take advantage of having more information on this, because they're only going to benefit from it in the long run. The tactical side refers to, for example, exercise routines. I'm sure all of you often, get questioned about what should I be doing with my horse during the week? How often should I ride? How long should they outride? Lunging, pole work, etc. Obviously, it's very specific, to every horse, and depends on where you are at a given point in time. So, if you're building up to a competition, for example, obviously your routine will alter accordingly. How much should they practice things? How often should they practice things? All of those sort of tactical sides of the day-to-day riding that gives your pupils, the chance to feel that they are benefiting and gaining, but not at the loss of the horse. So very often people are more focused on what they need to practice than actually what the horses need to practice. So it's, I think, also a good opportunity to create awareness on that side of things. Then, if you talk about the build up to competition, and I think a good way to handle any of these, let's call them remote sessions, would be to build your sort of slide deck, if you like I'm doing now, without giving all of the information. So to try to elicit the information from your pupils so that you know how much they know. So, modern coaching is trying to move away from spoon feeding. It's trying to get people to think more for themselves, to give them the tools to actually be able to be really, really competent in the sport in a very rounded way. So I certainly wouldn't do this as a sort of a lecture or spoon feeding information. I would handle it more like a discussion. So let's talk about building up to competition, and then listen to what they have to say about it. What would your plan be with your horse and where you are at a given point in time? So, what you can add to that is, or prompt, for example, or add in if they can't think of anything more to say, is, obvious things like, for example, don't go entering a level or a test that you're not capable of riding. Being properly competitive is about actually competing above the level, below the level that you are riding at show. I beg your pardon, not that round. So in other words, your home riding should be way above your competitive riding in order to be competitive. So you've obviously got to go in there and really be competent at what you're doing. So things like, for example, knowing tests, encouraging pupils to be able to write tests from memory is a big thing, because obviously it takes one thing away from them when it comes to a show. They're not wondering where they're going if they can't hear their instructor calling or whoever. And then talking about, the practice, how do they practice, how often should they ride the tests? That is a discussion thing. You can have some pupils that feel they need very often to run through tests over and over again, which is fine. One's got to work out what works in a sensible way. And then, obviously talk about what is a good way to plan it leading up to being at your best on the day of the show. So you don't want to drill the horse endlessly for hours, for however many days leading up to show. The horse gets in, it's on its knees, and it's got nothing to show when it goes into the ring. So there's quite a lot in terms of competition strategy that one can brainstorm, taking on board your pupils' needs and feelings as well. And if it makes sense, that's great. And if it doesn't, then obviously it's an opportunity for you to explain what sort of game plan you think would be good. Then you can also talk about the actual day of competing and the warm-up. So, I think it's essential to have some kind of checklist. I mean, how often have we as coaches arrived at shows and had people running around frantic because hat's been left at home or bridle or whatever? Help them to put a checklist together so that they can get to the show and know that absolutely everything they need is there. It's one less thing to worry about. Help them with talking about the timing of when to arrive. Does the horse need 2 hours to calm down or whatever? That you can really have a proper competition plan for the day, that if you're able to be there with them, that you can walk around, check the surrounds for potential sort of unforeseen uncontrollables that could have a negative impact on the performance, so that you can also perhaps discuss those things. I mean, there again, your pupils in this kind of one-on-one discussion could say, oh my God, I'm uptight about this or about that, and you've got a chance to actually talk about that and suggest that when things are back to whatever normal is going to be in the future, that one can perhaps do simulated circumstances to help them. And then to work out a pre-performance routine, which we're going to get into a bit later, which I think is absolutely essential. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about that, but that they should perhaps consider looking at another rider going through the test or jumping the course or whatever beforehand, so they can get a little bit into the zone, and then obviously discuss various ways of warming up. What should a warm up look like, and what are their ideas in terms of what they feel they need to do, so that you can also make them sort of think a little bit about how to get in the ring in their best form and not on an empty tank. The competition warm up is not a schooling session. It is a warm up, and it's a good chance to explain. For example, if you look at athletes in other sports, there's no 100-meter sprinter or hurdler or long distance runner that runs as fast as they can for hours on end before they go and run 100 meters. Why? They do a bit of stretching, a quick sprint over 10 meters or whatever to get the energy levels up and to get their arousal levels up, and then they're in the right position to go. So again, to try to sort of brainstorm the various things that are necessary around competing. And then the actual competing. So for example, one can talk about turnout and how you present yourself when you're going around the arena, because if the judge has finished making their comments on the rider before, I'm obviously talking about dressage now, when you're trotting around the edge of the arena, your pupils need to realize 100% that they're creating the impression before they go in. So at that point in time, the judge is looking and going, wow, that looks really good, or oops, the rider's maybe not turned out very well, or giving the horse a good old schooling session before it goes in, making sure it shows where all the problems are. So it's a good opportunity to talk about all of these things, and then also to discuss what happens directly afterwards. I mean, when you've finished a round, whether it's a round of eventing or show jumping, where obviously your result is more or less there, the jumps are standing or they aren't, but in dressage, we don't know until the scores come out, but that you can talk about the value of discussing and getting feedback from the rider about what the round has gone like, how did it go relative to where they are at a given point in time. I mean, I'd like to think that where your strengths and weaknesses are before you go in, so sort of whether the horse did well or whether there was something that you could have done better. If something unforeseen happened, did you manage to handle it well? So that really, you've decided for yourselves how it's gone before you've actually received the marks. I mean, hopefully the marks will correlate. If you think it's gone well, that your marks are good and not the opposite, which of course can happen, but that you've got a way of handling all of those things. And then furthermore, having a discussion about what should happen after the show. So not only cool off directly after the horses have done whatever round it is that they're doing, whether, it doesn't matter what discipline it is. And of course, what should also be done once they get home, and possibly 1 or 2 days thereafter. So from the tactical side, I mean, there's certainly at least one session on that. So if we move on more now into the mental side, you know, a lot of research has gone into what makes top athletes as good as what they are. So obviously a lot of research is based on the highest level of athletes, of course, because all athletes aspire to the highest level. And what research has found is that top athletes use these performance strategies that you can see on the slide. So, whoops, sorry, back one. So positive self-talk. Self-talk is something that everybody does. I'm sure all of you, whether you are, you know, busy doing your sport or going about your day-to-day business, everybody has some form of internal dialect or dialogue with themselves. And top athletes have a positive internal dialogue. This dialogue is encouraging and it's motivating. And not only that, but they also have the ability to reframe any kind of negative thought. So we'll get into that a bit later. Then they show a high degree of emotional control. And this refers to the ability to maintain control over one's emotions when the going gets tough. So in any situation where stress levels rise, which you can imagine at high level competitions they really do, they have the ability to absolutely maintain emotional control. So automaticity, of course, it means being able to perform skills automatically without conscious thought. So they, you know, when they don't have to think particularly about what they're doing. Goal setting is a big factor. They have strong performance and outcome related goals and objectives. Use of visualization or imagery, which involves creating, you know, a mental picture of what you want to happen or what you want to feel in reality. So obviously seeing yourself in your best form, you know, performing absolutely brilliantly. Activation, which is being able to achieve, you know, optimal levels of psychological and physiological arousal. So psyching yourself up or calming yourself down, whatever is relevant. And then, of course, relaxation, which are various methods of being able to calm yourself in the face of challenge. So if your anxiety is, you know, tends to rocket exactly when you don't need it to, you've got the means to actually reduce your levels of anxiety. And attentional control, which is, you know, refers to being able to maintain focus, you know, get into the zone. I'm sure you've all heard that. And being able to obliterate any form of distraction. So, as I said, those are the strategies that research have proven top-level athletes use. And what I'd like to try to look at are, you know, these aspects here, because obviously, you know, I'm not trying to put studying sports psychology down by any means whatsoever, because obviously it's been an incredible asset, but there are aspects of mental training that you don't really need to be a sports psychologist to be able to add value to your clients, because we sort of do them anyway. It's just a question of having a proper plan around them and really understanding, you know, what they can do. So motivation, we are going to look at, you know, everything around motivation, because obviously without motivation, you know, our pupils need to be motivated, otherwise we're not going to keep them for very long. Goal setting is a big aspect. You know, again, it sort of speaks for itself. Everybody who is aspiring has certain goals that they want to reach, and goals need to be set so that you know what the expectation is and you've actually got a point which you're trying to go to, you know, yourself and your pupil. Pre-performance routines are essential. It's part of having very well developed and systematic competition plans that help help your pupils to get relaxed, organized, and concentrated and into the zone. And then self-talk we've sort of spoken about, but it's in principle there are various thought control strategies that are not complicated for any coach to be able to do some kind of talk about, because I'm sure what you'll find, and then of course relaxation, I'm sure you'll find if you just bring these up and explain them a little bit, you'll find that your pupils will start talking about it on their own. So let's start with.
There's just a question.
Yes.
If you go this way now, even with your video coaching and taking in consideration this mental preparation we just discussed, there's a question from Anel. How would you perhaps propose we deal with a very, very nervous rider that won't ride without a coach in the arena? Using these two, what can you help her with?
So, is it a rider that is nervous of the horse, or is it a rider that is nervous about competing? So you can get riders that ride very well at home, and then they have very they are mentally, you talk about mental toughness, they don't have that. Then you have riders that are just nervous of their horses. So it's in a way two different things.
It says here because of bad fall. So obviously she's
it's actually nervous.
So you need someone in the arena with her to ride, but now we can't be in the arena. So is there something else? What would you do?
No, okay. So I must say that I would take that very far back, because I think that if the rider is that nervous, they probably are not ready for competing. So I think that's got to be done very, very systematically. It doesn't matter how far back down the ladder you go, in order to build up confidence, you're going to have to really, really go back to extreme basics. I mean, whether it is, obviously things like the feeding of the horse has got to be controlled. I mean, maybe, I don't know, if it depends. For example, if the horse got a bit of a complicated character, perhaps ridden by a more effective or stronger rider to get the horse a little bit more confident, you'd have to build that up very, very slowly.
Yeah, I think we're talking also about your I won't say entry-level rider, but someone it's like the day-to-day riding. They're just scared of riding, but with a coach there, they can manage. But now we're not there. Have we got anything on that?
Look, that is for sure going to be extremely difficult. And the only thing that I can say is that you've got to try to find something where they are reasonably within their comfort zone. So, I mean, even if it goes, I mean, I have had, for example, some years ago, a circumstance where a rider had one or two very unfortunate falls, and as we know, a nervous rider makes horses nervous and insecure. So it's really not a good situation, full stop. And actually, we went back to riding on the lunge and built up from there. So you've got to take it as far back as possible where the person is in a comfort zone until they get confidence, because this goes back to what we were talking about earlier on in terms of body language. So, your thoughts and your emotions are transmitted through your body. So that is why a situation with a nervous rider, it's actually not a good situation. So things like a neck strap on, and you've got to try to minimize the risk until they get more comfortable and only build up from there. So that, Anel, is going to be a very, very long journey, and it has to be taken in very small steps. And that will go into what we're going to talk about in a few minutes when it goes to the goal setting. The goals have got to be set accordingly. So a rider like that, in my opinion, it is unrealistic to have a goal in 2 months' time or 3 months' time to be racing around a 1 meter course of jumps, for example. So it's got to be done in little steps. I mean, confidence is a huge thing, and it is possible to build people's confidence up. It's just got to be done in very small steps.
So you're saying that we should maybe then change the goals completely. That
Definitely. Goals
might be
are,
that our goals for them are even too high, and that's probably
exactly.
what it's also
And we'll talk about that when we get into goal setting, because what one has to remember as well is that goals are not set in stone. So, but this is again, I mean, a perfect opportunity for a discussion with that particular pupil. I mean, it might be a bit more complicated to do these kind of things with children. One would have to obviously scale it down and make it a bit more fun. But, it's a good opportunity to enhance somebody's knowledge and to make them understand what is happening, what happens to the horse, so that a proper plan can be created moving forward to give the person the best possible chance of getting through that situation that they're in. And it is possible. I mean, I've had it. That particular person that I was talking about is riding Prix St. George now. So it is possible. It takes time, and you've got to let it take the time that it needs. So obviously, learning and getting further in your sport, dressage, jumping, whatever it is all about being sort of nudged out of the comfort zone, into a space where you are a little bit insecure, without putting them into a situation where they become completely rigid or frozen and incapable of moving forward. So of course you've got to push the boundaries the whole time, otherwise people don't get better. But one's got to be extremely careful when it comes to confidence.
So very similar to what we as coaches do now. We are being pushed out of our comfort zone to get onto the online thing a little bit more, get more blended, not just do your same old teaching in the arena, think of something else, and then, if it's scary, then it's probably you'll get better through it. So
you will, Jaco, because I don't know about what the rest of the coaches think, but I can only speak for myself, because obviously I'm limited to my frame of reference. But when I have to explain things and find different ways of explaining things, which is what being a coach is all about. There's never only one way of saying things. I learn. So it's a fantastic self-improvement situation that we find ourselves in, I think.
Yes, thank you. All right, let's carry on.
All right, so so I think we've done with that one. So move on to, I don't know where the red lines have pushed up on the screen, by the way, they're not from me. So now they've gone. So if we just start off talking about motivation, obviously motivation is very, very strongly related to goals, which is why we'll move on onto goals and goal setting after this. You have intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic is a much more powerful form of motivation, and it refers to where behavior is driven by internal rewards and satisfaction. So for obvious reasons, it's more powerful. Extrinsic is where behavior is driven by external reward or to avoid punishment. So it's not that it's not still a strong means of motivation, but obviously if you are intrinsically motivated, it's much better than extrinsically. And it's quite good to understand in which way your pupils are motivated, because it gives you quite a lot of information about also their behavior and what kind of plans you can have for helping them. Then motivation is more or less about a relationship between 4 key factors. Effort, of course, how hard are your pupils prepared to work, or how hard the people are prepared to work. Performance, what we do in training and in competition, and obviously that is directly affected by ability and knowledge. And again, the whole knowledge thing comes in, because this goes back to the whole remote side of things. Outcome, what your pupil will get out of the effort that they've put in. And of course, it's all relative. So a positive outcome does not mean winning. I mean, it's just achieving whatever you have set yourself as a goal at that point in time. So the outcome, and then obviously satisfaction. So how we feel about the process of the amount of effort, the performance, the outcome, if it has given us the degree of satisfaction that we've been looking for. So in order to be highly motivated, your pupils have to recognize that if they increase the effort, they can be rewarded with a positive change in performance, which is in turn reflected by the outcome of your pupils' values, both intrinsically and extrinsically. So it does affect both aspects of motivation. And it's usually measured, of course, against people around them. So sometimes people are motivated because of perhaps beating a personal best, but at the end of the day, you know, they like to be better than whoever's around them. So that's how you measure yourself.
At least, even if only you have better breeches, that's at least.
Even if only, you know, exactly, you dress more stylishly, that's also fine. Whatever you do, do it in style.
Sorry, Natalie, just to cut in here, while you talked about ability and knowledge here, whatever, there's a question on talent. How do you know if someone is talented? What do you look for as a coach in an athlete to say this is a talented person?
Okay, so that's quite easy to answer, because first of all, a good natural seat. So of course I'm talking about dressage now, but I don't doubt that it's the same for all disciplines and all sports for that matter. It's all about a good natural balance and a good correct seat that is able to apply the aids correctly, and then, you know, natural instinct. So where a rider on their own responds to the balance of the horse, responds to what the horse is doing, and there is a positive response from the horse. So natural talent, you have that without trying. That doesn't mean that somebody that doesn't have that naturally can't learn. So hard work is more important, I think. So natural ability, of course, is a big bonus, a very big bonus.
There's a question here from Lorette Taylor. I wonder who she is. She's that show jumping one. Yes, okay. Lorette, she says, what about natural feel? Do you think that can be learned, or is it like dandruff? Either you have it or you don't.
So Lorette, that goes back to, I think you're saying in a way the same thing as me. I've just used a different word. So you talk about feel. Feel is exactly the same thing. It's instinct.
Nats, thanks. You did. I'd typed that question and you were just explaining it.
Okay.
So thank you.
Okay, cool. So
but it boils down to the hard work aspect, that if you're not,
it does. And
if you may not be as naturally talented as person B, but hard work could beat it on any single day.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Okay. It's a huge aspect, and I do believe to a large extent, feeling can be learned. I do believe that. I mean, of course, there are very untalented people out there, and there's no doubt about that. Having said that, I do believe everybody can get better if they follow a program and put the work in. Yeah. But I do think that feel to a large extent can be learned. If you have it naturally, it's of course much better.
It's a bonus. Yeah.
Much better. So, for example, I'll give you an interesting sort of experience that I made fairly recently, and of course, you know, it's not the first time that's happened, but it never ceases to amaze me. Is if you have, and I'm sure you've experienced that as well, where you can have a very good rider, good meaning successful, hardworking with a very good horse, and they have, you know, they learn and they improve and they get further along and they do well, and they get a new horse, which is possibly very different to the one before, and they become completely lost. So where that rider has, of course, learned a different feel, or has learned a feel on a specific horse, they are fairly paralyzed when it comes to something that requires a different feeling and sensation. But they can often adjust. So feel is a very complicated thing. So just to wrap this one up, so it's only when you have expended effort, seen that the performance have judged the outcome and whether it's successful or not, relative to where you are at a given point in time, and you've evaluated the whole process, your level of satisfaction can then be determined, and that obviously interacts back to your future effort. So if we just look at the psychological variables which influence motivation, perceived competence and self-efficacy, they refer to a person's perception of themselves and the perception that they have of their capabilities and their ability to control their environment and situation. In other words, it refers to their skill. And that's obviously a big factor. Goal orientation, which is an individual's sort of disposition towards developing or validating their ability in achievement settings, and competition orientation sort of extrapolates that into a competition-specific construct.
Natalie, another question here about competition, sorry.
Yes.
Can big match temperament be taught by us coaches? What do you think about that?
So I think that so some people just have it, which is fantastic. But I believe that these things that we're talking about now, the goal setting, the visualization, the relaxation, self-talk, all of that kind of thing, proper pre-performance routines, help to develop big match temperament. Definitely. You can absolutely improve on that.
Thank you.
So if we just look at affect or mood state, which talks about feeling states and emotions and moods, and obviously these can vary in duration, they can vary in intensity, specificity, pleasantness, and level of arousal. And then enjoyment, of course, speaks for itself, but it's a very, very strong factor in determining adherence. And then contextual variables, things like money, work, your situations at home, significant others, and health. So obviously all of those things affect motivation. And then, of course, feedback from a variety of sources, like, for example, judges or coaches, very much so, and significant others. So the feedback from those areas obviously also affect motivation. So there are various models of goal setting. I've just chosen the GROW model of goal setting because it's sort of quite a common one. So goals have to have a clear end point. In other words, your pupils need to know once they've got there. They have to have a current reality. So where is your pupil now? What issues or challenges do they face? Options, what options do they have to overcome obstacles, and the way forward. So what actions should they take in order to achieve their goals? And then if you look at the principles which underpin that particular GROW model, you need to develop a good rapport or relationship with your pupils. It's really super important that is established. You need to be open and honest about the goals that are being set. I mean, they really, we just go back to the nervous rider. That is essential, that you're on the same page in terms of what is realistic, and also to be honest about where a person is. Otherwise, they're just setting themselves up for disappointment. You need to discuss what their needs are, and not only their needs, but your needs as well. And you should try to elicit needs from them and not impose them. In other words, to try to find out what their ideas are and not sort of put the ideas onto them. And then discuss what is the best way to work together in order to achieve them, and aim to have a win-win situation. And if we then just look at the types of goals, general goals, I mean, that also speaks for itself. Specific goals are also important to have. What are the outcome goals, performance goals, process goals, which refer to, they support performance goals by giving something specific to focus on as you work towards the performance goals. And then you have short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. But what's important to remember is that goals need to be flexible. So the effect of goals on performance, of course, it focuses attention, it mobilizes effort in proportion to the demand of the task, it enhances persistence, and encourages development of strategies for achieving the goals. And I think it's important also to regularly revisit the goals and see how you are doing in terms of what you have set for yourselves for your performance. So if we just move on to visualization or imagery, what is imagery? So imagery is where people or athletes imagine themselves in their specific environment performing whatever activity it is, using all of their senses, but in a way that they would ideally like to perform that activity. So, obviously you don't want to imagine yourself being bucked off. I mean, you want to see yourself jumping an awesome round or riding an awesome test or whatever it is. So what's important is that these images should leave the athlete performing successfully and feeling satisfied with their performance. And then just going back to the whole big match temperament, I mean, it's not difficult to sit and discuss and to encourage your pupils to take the time to do this slowly and methodically. And they should do it on a regular basis, because it becomes very, very much part of the routine of setting themselves up for successful competitive riding. So the kinesthetic aspect of it is ensuring that they don't only see themselves doing it, but that they can actually feel it. They've got to feel every corner, every movement, every half halt, every smack of the ball or picking up or whatever it is in, polo cross or whatever it is. I mean, the whole sensation must also be included in the imagery to make it more real. So it's also very, very motivational, of course, and can really assist in reducing anxiety. So if your pupil is getting themselves really wound up before they're getting on, it really helps to bring that all down, get them into the zone, and increase their confidence. So the steps that you can help your pupils to go through is to find a calm and quiet environment, to try to relax, to create the image where it's, let's say, for example, going through a dressage test, and get them to explain if they like to see it in their mind as if they're watching a video, or if they see it through their eyes as if they're sitting on a horse. I mean, people have different ways of doing it. And then to rehearse the test or the feeling or the round or the game or whatever it is, preferably in slow motion, so that you can feel all of the senses working, smelling and hearing, and all of the senses must be engaged. And to keep repeating it over and over again before they sort of speed it up into a little bit more real time. And I really believe that visualization is a fantastic part of pre-performance routines to help get people into the right place before they compete. So if we talk about self-talk and reframing, I mean, what is self-talk? It is something that can be positive or negative. So it can obviously discourage or distress. We've already spoken that it is that inner conversation that's influenced by our subconscious. And of course, it influences massively the way we feel and behave. And don't believe that your pupils don't do it. Every single person does it. So it's a wonderful aspect to address, and you could spend a whole session on this, because people say, oh, I can't do it, and this is terrible, etc., etc. Those are the kind of things that one's got to get out of the equation. So, of course, it can be used to increase motivation. Of course, it can be used also to facilitate learning and enhance performance, but it's very good to cope with anxiety and to boost confidence and to focus attention. And of course, also to manage stress. So it's good to get self-talk down to trigger words if possible, which should be short and vivid and should emphasize whatever the particular target or goal is for that day. And that can be, whatever. If the person is uptight, relax, for example, or breathe or something like that. And if a person sort of admits or realizes that they use a lot of negative self-talk, you can encourage them to reframe those thoughts or words, whatever it is that they're going through, by trying to change negative thoughts into positive ones. So, for example, instead of seeing something as a problem, see it as an opportunity and discuss what that opportunity could be. you could reframe using mental imagery. If they're going, oh my God, he's going to buck in the corner, encourage them to see themselves coping by whatever, going through the corner and shouldering or whatever it is. So help them to create an image and try to get them to reframe that thought with a positive image. Obviously through language. I mean, you can just change a negative, instead of I can't do that, to change it, I can do it. Or through storytelling. So you can try to, if they come up with a scenario, try to, even if you make something up that sort of negates what they're saying. So thought stopping is another thing where if a negative thought comes into the mind, they even if they say it out loud, say the word stop in order to interrupt that particular negative thought process and try to refocus it onto some kind of positive cue. So they can try to start to take note of that kind of thing, and then you've actually got a good framework with which to work to help them get themselves onto a more positive, positive track. So if we look at relaxation, which is, I think, a big factor, because most pupils, tend to deal with nerves and being uptight and tense and all of that. You get progressive muscular relaxation, which is something that has to be practiced outside of a competition environment. In fact, on a day-to-day basis, it would be good if they could take 5 minutes or however long they need to actually go through that, where you go through literally from your head down to your toes, extreme tensing, followed by fast relaxing of different muscle groups. As I say, it really needs to be practiced quite a lot to be able to get control over the different muscle groups. And it helps them to learn to recognize a buildup of tension, but not only that, is to have been practiced getting rid of it, that idea of letting loose and being able to relax the muscle group. So it's highly effective if it's practiced, and of course it helps to focus attention. And then like Benson's relaxation response, so this is a little bit more, in a way, complicated, if you like. It's not really, but it's got a attention control element whereby your pupil could go and sit somewhere where they're comfortable and quiet and start to concentrate on very slow and rhythmical breathing, where they combine each breath with some word. It doesn't matter what it is, any meaningless word, in order to get them. So it's sort of like meditating, if you like, but not really. But that, the sort of meaningless word and the concentrating on the breath very often helps to bring anxiety down. And then centering is a process where if stress rises, centering can be used to sort of, recover lost concentration by, again, focusing on a few deep breaths, focusing in on deep breathing, and then focusing back out onto the appropriate performance-related thought or cue or whatever. So that's something, for example, when the rider's already on the horse and their heart feels like it's going to jump out of their mouth, that they can do that, try and focus in on the breathing and then focus back out onto whatever, if you're about to jump over a jump in the warm-up or go into the dressage arena. So I believe that all of these aspects should absolutely be part of a pre-performance routine in order to get oneself relaxed, and focused. So you can see how the pre-performance routine is something that can take a lot of discussion to also find out how long everything takes, so that can be built into whatever happens on the day of the competing. What time do you get there? Do you do this at home, or do you do it just before? I think it's good to go through the motions just before you get on. But if their goals are high and if they have high expectations of themselves, they should take all of these things into consideration. So just to sort of wrap up very quickly what we've been through.
Sorry, this is a question about this. Let me just get it here. Sorry. Yes, with regards to pre-performance routines.
Yes.
In set disciplines like dressage, you have your test beforehand and you can go through your thing. How would you do it for a show jumping round, or maybe a round where you fastball, like a polo cross or something like that? But you don't have that much time and you don't know there's a lot of things you don't know is going to happen. Is it a left turn? Is it a right turn? How many strides? That you can only see when the course is there. So you don't have so much time.
Yes. Okay. Well, I guess with show jumping, it's probably a little bit closer to dressage in that you know what the course is going to be. But there again, you will have a reasonable idea, I guess, based on, you know, if you're the 20th horse in, let's talk about show jumping and each round takes 1 minute. I don't know, Laura can correct me on that. It's not that difficult to work backwards from there. And each rider and each rider coach combination should, through, you know, systematically work out where the rider's weaknesses are. So, you know, you might have a rider that tends to be half asleep, actually to be more activated, in which case you're not going to bother with relaxation techniques. So it's quite person specific, depending on what their needs are. And I think this is not something, this is again, through discussion, you can work out what is relevant to each person. So a pre-performance routine might only involve...
So Nat, can I interject?
Yes, please do.
Because I want to go back to the slow-mo that you specifically mentioned, which I find so interesting because I've never done it with my pupils before, and I think it's really important. So that is from a coaching perspective, but from a rider's perspective now, riding a Grand Prix, I obviously use visualization techniques to jump my own track, but I've never slowed it up in my mind because there's always a time aspect. So I think this is not for now, something I'd like to chat to you later about. So it's it's from my riding perspective at high performance level, and then coaching level, which I think is great, which I've never done, show jumping specific.
Yes.
Because I've obviously had the time aspect in my mind for the kids as well, you know? Okay, so, right, sorry, I'm gone. I'm gone.
That's absolutely fine. And Law, I think also important to remember is that show jumping, for example, on the whole is anyway much faster. So dressage is much longer and much slower. The movements are much more sort of spread out. So it is more easy, of course, and very important to go through it in slow motion because so much is about preparation. So how you ride the corner to set up for the shoulder in or to set up for the extension or preparation for the transition, or if at a high level you have whatever, piaffe passage coming around the corner, how do you set the horse up for that? And normally you should know your horse. So you need to also encourage your pupils to know the horses better. I mean, for example, if the horse, and again, I'm not speaking as an expert at all when it comes to show jumping, but I'm kind of imagining if the horse has got is a bit tricky at a water jump or at a water tray, you're going to ride that a bit differently than what you would, for example, you know, you're going to ride a vertical different from a triple combination with an ox at the end or something like that. So that you can slow down a lot in terms of if you've seen, you know, you get to walk the track beforehand. If you're unlucky enough to be first rider in, obviously it's got to go much quicker in your mind. But, you know, you'd have to adjust that accordingly. But I think sort of my experience, to be quite honest with you, with pupils that I've got that are non-dressage, these things that we're talking about here are actually something that I have to concentrate a lot less on. It comes a lot more naturally to, you know, show jumping and eventing riders and what it does to dressage riders, to be quite honest with you. But I do think it forms a big part of the routine, even if it's a test that you imagine in terms of style or approach and what distance you should take off from the jump and how it feels in the air, especially if you are doing your imagery on your own horse, dealing with weaknesses that they may well have. I don't know, banks or something like that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so if we just have a quick look, I did sort of like a mini wrap up of pupils that are not particularly prepared as well as what they could be for competition. We'll just sort of go through it, sort of just a wrap up of everything we've done. Demand appraisals obviously is, you know, directly affected by the dispositional style of each person. The athlete's fitness and competence, that of course is also dispositional influence, but low confidence, average seat, low fitness and condition, low competence, and low knowledge. The horse's fitness and competence, low health, low fitness, negative attitude, average to low ability, insecure at the particular level you're competing in. The psychological skills, low self-efficacy, low perceived control, negative self-talk, no or unrealistic goals, low use of visualization, inability to relax and focus, and no pre-performance routine. Obviously, you cannot have a high expectation of performance outcome. That's not to say that it won't go well, but these factors definitely will have a positive influence. So if we just look at it the other way around, it's obviously taking all of the same aspects on a more positive note. Even though I've just seen it says low confidence when it should say high, but you know, it's the high side of things, and the good side of things will lead to a positive performance outcome. So those two tables really just cover everything we've spoken about. And that's the end of that.
A lot of thank you, awesome, great, can't wait for the PDF, that kind of thing. So thank you very much, Natalie. I think it was quite an intense session, but very necessary, because it's not often that coaches talk to other coaches about stuff that we struggle with, our athletes struggle with. So thank you very much for taking this time and seeing this through. Like I said, we're going to put this all into PDF, and Regular will put it onto an email for us and send to everyone. If there's still people who's not on the mailing list, or you want to be on the mailing list, please, you can just send Regular a message, or just type your email address here in the chat now, and then we will pick it up and just add you to the mailing list. Thank you very much, Natalie.
And if you just give me a day or two, because I'll just add on obviously a little bit more, because there was quite a bit of content over and about the slides, just so they're a bit more easy to follow, but we'll get it out to you in the next couple of days.
Well, we'll give you one day, since it is lockdown, you've got nothing else to do, so
this is also true.
Do it all in one day. Okay, there's a couple of email addresses come through, so please, and if you know of your friends who want to come on, this really, again, these webinars are for coaches, by coaches, and we actually managed, as you see, we could make the Zoom session a lot longer now, so yeah, we decided to actually buy a license. So if there's anyone out there who's feeling generous and want to donate a little bit, please also contact Regular, and then maybe we can use this platform also for future education for students, maybe the younger children and so on. So yeah, if anyone feels generous and wants to give a $10 or $1,000, yeah, please get in touch with Regular. So we will be back next Tuesday again, 7 o'clock. And then, yeah, we'll discuss with you what our next option is going to be. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks,
yes, Natalie, details, if everyone wants to chat to her directly, then you can get her there, or stalk, or whatever you want to do. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Please stay safe, and good luck for the rest of the lockdown. And
thanks, everyone. It was fantastic. Thank you.